I thought my wedding day would be the happiest moment of my life. I was 62 years old, a widow for 15 years, and I'd finally found love again with Thomas, a kind, gentle man who made me feel young and cherished. We'd planned an intimate ceremony at a beautiful inn in the Virginia countryside, just close family and a few dear friends. My daughter Rachel was my maid of honor. She was 40 years old, divorced, and had been living with me for the past year while she rebuilt her life. I was so grateful to have her by my side on this special day. What I didn't know was that my daughter, my own flesh and blood, was about to destroy me in the cruelest way possible. Welcome to Jennifer's Stories, and I hope you enjoy this story. If you're just joining for the first time, please like so that we will reach others who found themselves in similar situations, and please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss similar stories from me. This is how I discovered the unthinkable on my wedding night, and how I found the strength to rise from the ashes at 62 years old. My name is Catherine Morrison, and this is what happened when I dared to believe in love again. I met Thomas at a grief support group 3 years ago. We'd both lost our spouses, mine to cancer, his to a car accident. We understood each other's pain, our loneliness, our fear of moving forward. At first, it was just coffee after the meetings, then dinners, then weekend walks through the park. I told myself I was too old to fall in love again, that my time for romance had passed. But Thomas was patient, kind. He never rushed me, and slowly, carefully, I opened my heart again. When he proposed on my 61st birthday, I cried for an hour. My daughter Rachel was thrilled, or so I thought. "Mom, you deserve this," she said, hugging me tight. "You've been alone for so long. Thomas is wonderful." I believed her. I trusted her completely. She helped me plan everything, the venue, the flowers, the menu. She picked out my dress, a beautiful cream-colored gown that was elegant but age-appropriate. "You look stunning, Mom," she said on the morning of the wedding, helping me with my hair, like a bride from a classic movie. I squeezed her hand, grateful beyond words. The ceremony was perfect. Thomas and I had written our own vows. When he promised to cherish me for whatever time we had left, I saw tears in his eyes. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," he whispered as we kissed to seal our marriage. The reception was small but joyful. Our friends danced, our families laughed. Rachel gave a beautiful toast about how proud she was of me for choosing happiness again. But as the evening went on, I noticed something strange. Thomas kept checking his phone, stepping outside to take calls, seeming distracted even when he was standing right next to me. "Is everything okay?" I asked during our first dance. "Of course," he said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just some work stuff, nothing to worry about." I wanted to believe him. When the party ended around 10 p.m., we said goodnight to our guests and headed to our suite, a beautiful room on the second floor with a fireplace and a view of the gardens. I was nervous, but excited. It had been 15 years since I'd been intimate with anyone. But Thomas barely looked at me as we entered the room. "I'm exhausted," he said, loosening his tie. "It's been a long day." "I know," I said gently, touching his arm. "But it's our wedding night." He pulled away. "Catherine, I'm 65 years old. I need to rest. Can we just not tonight?" I felt my heart sink, but I tried to be understanding. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "We have all the time in the world." He nodded, kissed my forehead quickly, and went straight to the bathroom. When he came out 10 minutes later, he was already in his pajamas. He climbed into bed, turned away from me, and within minutes, he was snoring. I stood there in my wedding nightgown, a beautiful silk thing Rachel had helped me pick out, feeling foolish and unwanted. But I told myself it was okay. We were both older. Romance doesn't have to look the same at 62 as it did at 22. I changed into my regular pajamas, climbed into bed beside him, and tried to sleep. But something felt wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. I couldn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, listening to Thomas snore, feeling a growing sense of unease I couldn't explain. At around 1:30 a.m., Thomas's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He stirred, grabbed it, read the screen, then carefully got out of bed. I pretended to be asleep, watching through half-closed eyes. He dressed quickly, jeans and a sweater, and slipped out of the room without a sound. My heart started pounding. Where was he going at 1:30 in the morning on our wedding night? I waited 5 minutes, then got up and put on my robe. The inn was quiet, most guests already asleep. I crept down the hallway, following the direction Thomas had gone. I heard voices coming from downstairs, from one of the guest rooms on the first floor. I recognized Thomas's voice immediately. And then I heard another voice, a woman's voice, my daughter's voice. "You said you'd leave her after the wedding," Rachel hissed. My blood ran cold. I know, Thomas said, his voice strained, "but it's complicated. We need to wait for the right moment." "The right moment?" Rachel laughed bitterly. "You just married her. You stood there and promised to love her forever." "It was the only way to make sure we get the inheritance," Thomas said, and I felt the floor drop out from under me. Inheritance? My father's life insurance paid out $800,000 when he died. I heard myself being discussed like a business transaction. Catherine invested it well. With the house and her retirement accounts, she's worth over $1.2 million. "And you made sure she put you on all the accounts after the wedding," Rachel said. "Power of attorney, beneficiary designations, joint ownership, everything," Thomas confirmed. "Give it 6 months, maybe a year. A woman her age, things can happen. Health issues, accidents." I grabbed the doorframe to keep from collapsing. They were planning to kill me? My new husband and my own daughter were plotting my murder for my money. "I can't believe I'm doing this to my own mother," Rachel said. But her voice held no real remorse. "And what about tonight?" Rachel asked. "She's going to wonder why you didn't—" I told her I was tired. At our age, these things happen. She believed it. They both laughed. The sound of their laughter, cold, calculating, cruel, snapped something inside me. I pushed the door open. They both froze, caught in the act like children with their hands in the cookie jar. Except this wasn't about cookies. This was about my life. "Mom!" Rachel started, her face going white. "Don't," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "Don't say a word." Thomas tried to recover. "Catherine, this isn't what it looks like." I interrupted. "It's exactly what it looks like. I heard everything. The inheritance, the plan to wait 6 months, the accidents you're going to arrange." The room went silent. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, real ones this time, I thought, but whether they were from guilt or from being caught, I couldn't tell. "How long?" I asked, looking between them. Rachel broke first. 8 months, she whispered, "since you introduced us to Thomas. Since we realized how much you were worth." 8 months! The entire courtship had been a lie. Every sweet word Thomas had spoken, every loving gesture, every promise of forever, all of it had been an elaborate con to steal my money. And my own daughter had been in on it from the beginning. "I raised you," I said to Rachel, my voice breaking. "I sacrificed everything for you. Worked 2 jobs to send you to college. Took you back in when your marriage fell apart. And this is how you repay me?" "You don't understand what it's like," Rachel suddenly burst out. "You with your comfortable retirement and your nice house. I have nothing, Mom, nothing." "So you decided to kill me for it?" I asked incredulously. "We weren't actually going to," Thomas started. "Yes, you were," I cut him off. "I heard you. Things can happen. Health issues, accidents. You were planning my murder." The words hung in the air, undeniable and horrifying. Thomas's face hardened. The kind, gentle mask he had worn for 3 years finally dropped completely. "You're right," he said coldly. "We were. And you can't prove a thing. Who's going to believe that a devoted husband and loving daughter would plot against a confused, elderly woman?" "Elderly?" I repeated, fury replacing my shock. "You're 62, Catherine," he said with a cruel smile. People your age get confused, forgetful. They imagine things, especially after stressful events like weddings. I'm not confused, I said firmly, and I'm not forgetful, and I have proof. It was a bluff, but I needed time to think. What proof? Rachel asked, nervously. The inn has security cameras, I lied, audio and video. They recorded this entire conversation. I saw the flash of panic in both their eyes. You're lying, Thomas said, but he didn't sound certain. Am I? I asked. Are you willing to bet your freedom on it? I turned and walked out of the room, my legs somehow carrying me, even though they felt like jelly. Behind me, I heard frantic whispers as they debated what to do. I went straight to the front desk. The night clerk looked up, surprised to see a guest at 2 a.m. I need to call the police, I said.
Is everything all right, ma'am? He asked, concerned. No, I said simply. Everything is very far from all right. The police arrived within 20 minutes. By then, I'd called my lawyer, an old friend who'd handled my late husband's estate, and explained the situation.
Don't sign anything else, he said urgently. And Catherine, I need to tell you something. Thomas came to me 3 weeks ago asking about your assets. Said he wanted to make sure you were protected after the wedding. I found it odd, but I thought he was just being a concerned new spouse. He was planning this from the beginning, I said, my voice hollow. I'm getting an emergency order to freeze all your accounts, my lawyer said, and I'm starting annulment proceedings immediately. This marriage was based on fraud. It can be voided. When the police knocked on Thomas and Rachel's door, I was standing right there with them. Thomas tried to play the concerned husband. Officers, I think my wife is having some kind of episode. She's been very stressed. I recorded everything, I interrupted. They all turned to look at me. I held up my phone. I recorded your entire conversation, I said. Every word of your plan to kill me for my inheritance. It was another lie. I hadn't thought to record anything, but the police didn't know that. And more importantly, neither did Thomas and Rachel. You're bluffing, Thomas said, but his voice wavered. Am I? I asked, holding his gaze. Do you want to hear yourself talking about arranging accidents? About how women my age just die sometimes? Rachel started crying again. Mom, please. Save it, I said coldly. You don't get to call me Mom anymore. You lost that right when you decided my death was worth $1.2 million. The police separated them for questioning. Without the recording I'd claimed to have, the case would have been difficult to prove. But I'd learned something important in my 62 years. Desperate people make mistakes, and Thomas made a big one. When the police questioned him, he didn't ask for a lawyer. He was so confident in his charm, so sure he could talk his way out of anything, that he tried to explain everything away. And in doing so, he admitted to the plot. Not directly, but he said enough incriminating things, mentioning my assets, talking about plans for the future, making comments about my age and health, that it painted a clear picture. Rachel broke completely. In a separate room, away from Thomas, she confessed everything. How Thomas had approached her months before he even met me. How he'd researched wealthy widows in grief support groups. How he'd specifically targeted me because I was old enough to be vulnerable, but young enough to have years of assets to drain. How Rachel, drowning in debt and desperate, had agreed to help him in exchange for half the inheritance once I was gone. The police arrested them both. Thomas for attempted fraud and conspiracy, Rachel for conspiracy to commit fraud, and, based on their conversation about arranging accidents, conspiracy to commit murder. As they led Thomas away in handcuffs, he looked at me with pure hatred. You're a lonely old woman. You should be grateful anyone wanted you. I looked him straight in the eye. "I'd rather be alone than murdered," I said calmly. The annulment went through within a week. My lawyer was able to prove fraud, that Thomas had entered the marriage with the specific intent to steal my assets, and that Rachel had actively helped him deceive me. Every document Thomas had gotten me to sign was voided. Every account he'd been added to was closed. Every piece of legal access he'd obtained was revoked. I got restraining orders against both of them. The criminal case took longer. Rachel eventually took a plea deal, 5 years in prison, in exchange for testifying against Thomas. Thomas went to trial and was convicted of multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy. He got 15 years. He would be 80 years old when he got out, if he lived that long. Rachel called me from prison 6 months later. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up the phone. "I'm sorry," she said immediately, her voice raw from crying. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. I need you to know that I hate myself for what I did every single day." I was quiet for a long moment. "You were my daughter," I finally said. "I would have given you money if you'd asked. I would have helped you rebuild your life. But instead, you chose to plan my death. I know. And I'll regret it for the rest of my life." "Good," I said, and I hung up. I never spoke to her again. The months after the wedding were the darkest of my life. Darker even than when my first husband died, because at least then I'd had my daughter for support. Now, I had no one. My friends at the grief support group had all witnessed the wedding. They'd all seen me happy and hopeful. Now they looked at me with pity every time I walked into a meeting. I stopped going. I stopped going to a lot of places. I was too embarrassed, too ashamed that I'd been thoroughly fooled. At 62 years old, I'd been conned by a criminal and betrayed by my own child. I felt like a fool. I spent most days in my house alone, questioning every decision I'd ever made. Had I been a bad mother? Had I somehow driven Rachel to this? Had I been naive to think someone could love me again at my age? My therapist told me I was experiencing trauma and depression. "You were the victim of elaborate elder abuse," she said gently. "This wasn't your fault, Catherine." But it was hard to believe that. Then, one day, about 4 months after the wedding, I got a letter. It was from a woman named Eleanor, who'd read about my case in the local newspaper. "Dear Mrs. Morrison," she wrote, "I saw your story and wanted to reach out. 5 years ago, I was targeted by a similar scheme. A man I met at church courted me, married me, and within 6 months had drained my accounts and disappeared. I was devastated and ashamed. But with time, I rebuilt my life. I'm writing to tell you that you will survive this. You will be happy again. Don't let them steal your future along with everything else. Sincerely, Eleanor, age 68. I read that letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Someone understood. Someone had survived. I wrote back to Eleanor, thanking her. She responded immediately, and we started corresponding regularly. Eventually, we met for coffee. She was 73 now, sharp as a tack, with a quick wit and a warm smile. She wasted 2 years being bitter, she told me. Don't make my mistake. Your life isn't over. It's just different than you planned. Through Eleanor, I met other women, a whole network of survivors of financial elder abuse. Some had been targeted by romantic partners, others by family members, some by both. We started a support group. We met twice a month at a community center, sharing our stories and helping each other heal. I realized I wasn't alone, and I wasn't a fool. I was a survivor.
On what would have been my first wedding anniversary with Thomas, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went back to the grief support group. When I walked in, several people immediately came over to hug me. "We've missed you," one woman said. "We were worried about you," another added. And I realized that these people didn't pity me. They respected me for surviving, for fighting back, for refusing to let Thomas and Rachel destroy me. I started attending regularly again. And one evening, a new member joined the group. His name was Harold. He was 68, a widower of 2 years. During his introduction, he said something that caught my attention. He said, "I'm not looking to date. Honestly, I'm not ready for that, and I'm not sure I ever will be. I just want to meet people who understand what it's like to lose someone you love." After the meeting, I approached him. "I appreciate what you said about not being ready to date. After what I've been through, I feel the same way." He said, "I read about your case. I'm sorry that happened to you." "Thank you," I said, and then, surprising myself, I added, "Would you like to get coffee sometime? Just as friends. Just as two people who've been through hell and survived." He smiled. "I'd like that very much." That was 2 years ago. Harold and I are still friends. Just friends. We meet for coffee every week. We go to museums and concerts. We take walks in the park. We talk about our late spouses with love and respect. We talk about our families. His children are wonderful, and he's never once pressured me to forgive Rachel. He's never once tried to become anything more than my friend, and that's exactly what I need. I'm 64 now. I still live in my house, though I've changed the locks and updated my security system. My support group for financial elder abuse survivors has grown to 40 members. We've helped 12 people escape similar situations before they got as bad as mine did. I've learned to trust again, cautiously, but genuinely. I've learned that I'm stronger than I ever knew. And I've learned that happiness at 64 looks different than happiness at 30. But it's just as real. I don't know if I'll ever fall in love again. Honestly, I'm okay if I don't. I have good friends. I have meaningful work helping other survivors. I have a comfortable life that I've built for myself. And I have my dignity intact. Thomas took a year from me. Rachel broke my heart in ways I'm still processing. But they didn't destroy me. They didn't get my money, my home, or my future. And most importantly, they didn't get to decide how my story ended. I did. Last week, I got a letter from Rachel's prison. She's up for parole review next year and wanted me to write a letter of support. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. She made her choices. Now she has to live with the consequences. Just like I'm living with mine. The difference is, my consequences include freedom, friendship, and a future I get to control. Hers include prison, guilt, and the knowledge that she betrayed the person who loved her most. I wouldn't trade places with her for anything. People ask me sometimes if I'm afraid of being alone, and my answer is always the same. I was more alone standing in that wedding suite with a husband who wanted me dead than I am now living in my house with my cat, my friends, and my hard-won peace. Loneliness isn't about being by yourself. It's about being with someone who makes you feel invisible. And I will never, ever be invisible again. My name is Catherine Morrison. I'm 64 years old. I survived my wedding night, and I'm building a life that's finally, truly mine.